Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Table Talk. I'm your host, Jake Combs, and tonight we have probably one of the biggest unboxing videos we probably have ever done in one sitting. Specifically covering the new Leagues of Votann releases. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the Einhyr Champion, we're not going to go ahead and break him open, simply because we've actually gone over his sprue when we did the army box a few weeks ago. So this is actually going to be the first time that he's been released individually outside of that army box. Now, for those of you wondering, these items are officially on pre-order as of today. And so obviously these were sent to us by Games Workshop for the purpose of this video. And so we thank them for that. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So we're going to go ahead and put him aside. Now, this is a great model. I really love the sculpt. And having another one, you know, especially for kit bashing options, is always a good thing. So we're going to go ahead and save the Land Fortress till a little bit later. So we'll just set these aside for us. All right. And we're actually going to start with Grimnyr. Now, I got my hobby knife right here because my pocket knife that I normally use, I picked up, set down somewhere, and do not remember where it is. So, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and break the seal on all of these other ones real quick, just to save us some time. There we go for those. And there we go for the Land Fortress. All right. So Grimnyr, I personally love his sculpt. Just because he's probably the most out of place character in the entire army as far as appearances. I mean, he looks like a wizard dwarf and just does not fit with the overall aesthetic of the Votann. And so that's one of the reasons I love him. Now, that being said, I actually, for those unaware, I have been running a Warhammer role-playing game for quite a while and actually have a homebrew character in there that is a wizard dwarf. And basically the way that he basically carries himself in our game fits very much with this aesthetic. And so I will probably end up painting one of these just for that player to have a new model of himself on there. And so I'm really looking forward to tackling that. But let's go ahead and take a look at Grimnyr. So this is a 3 model kit. And I do see from the back that there is a variant that you can do without his hood and without his beard. So we have our 3 bases, 2 for the drones that follow him, and then 1 for himself. And then we have our curved flight stands, a single sprue, and then our assembly guide, which is 4 total pages. And actually really just the 3, because the 4th page shows the painted versions and kind of side views of the models. Now, having previously not really been able to see what the drones look like from the side, seeing the picture of them right here and showing that kind of scorpion tail thing really looks cool. And I really like the way that these guys are designed, and definitely can already think of some kit bash opportunities there. Let's go ahead and put the stand and the bases back in here just so we don't lose them. All right. So looking at the sprue itself, and I have to admit right away, there is a ton of detail, like way more than we typically see on most models. Now, looking at Grimnyr's robes, I originally thought that this kind of needlework on his hems were hand painted on there, but they definitely are not, which is a great thing for people like myself who can't freehand for crap. And so having that detail already there is going to make replicating this paint scheme much, much easier for myself. And so with the different with the different head options, I was curious if the beard itself was removable, and it's not. So it is actually literally two different heads, not just parts of it that you can swap out. So you got the one with the beard and the hood, and the one with the braids and no hood at all. And makes me curious if that version is basically kind of meant as a more generic unit. So let me bring these back out so we can look at the rules. All right, so it is only listed as Grimnyr and his drones, which are called CORV, or I'm going to call them Corv. So even when you change the head, it's still Grimnyr. So that definitely, it was not what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be more kind of a general, unit of some sort, kind of like the generic captain that we have there. So a ton of amazing detail. I mean, honestly, for a kind of more good guy type army, the leagues are quickly coming up to be by far one of my favorites. And I love their aesthetic. I like that we've kind of gone away from the old naming of calling them squats, just because it definitely sounds derogatory. And so even though they're called squats in Necromunda, as an army itself, it's not an army of squats, it's the Leagues of Votann. And I think that was a really good shift, because it kind of puts a negative connotation on the name, which is intended. And if you have somebody that is has dwarfism, they definitely don't want other members in the community to be calling them squats as well. So I think kind of moving away from that for the army as a whole is definitely a good shift. And definitely hope that we see kind of more eliminating of that terminology as far as from Necromunda as well. At least with the Forge World characters that are actually listed as squats. But unless there's something there that I'm missing, I think that they are going to do that over time, especially once those models are no longer impressing. But that's just going to be basically something to kind of keep an eye out on. But this is a fantastically detailed model. I am in awe of the capability of their print team and their design team. I mean, these guys put so much detail into these pieces that, I mean, it is overwhelming looking at these and just thinking, how can I, replicate some of this in, my own green stuff work. And frankly, with this level of detail, my green stuff work can't compare in any way. So really cool model. Really looking forward to that one. All right, so next we're going to go to the Sagitaur. All right. So right away I can see this is 3 sprues. All right, so we have our transfers, our assembly guide, which is a lot involved. 4, 6. So 9 actual pages of instructions there. So quite a bit to work with. Now the armaments on top of the vehicle, they do have a lot of different options, or actually not a lot of different options. Looks like it's 3 different gun types you can choose from. And then there's a kind of a forward set of guns as well, but it listed as 5 different weapon characteristics because when you're using the missile launchers, it's actually 2 different types as one launcher. So give you some options there as far as how you're arming the Sagitaur. So we do have our clear sprues, or clear sprue rather, for the glass on the cockpits. Now, one thing I have actually learned, if you want to prime one of these clear pieces, the best way to do it is actually using a varnish. Especially maybe start with a matte varnish to just get started. Paint the actual lines, like segmenting the glass, and then do a glossy varnish specifically on the exposed glass itself to put that shine back in there. And it actually works quite well doing that. So we have the first sprue, which is the bulk of the body, and as well as the wheels themselves. Now, not an overwhelming amount of detail here, but it definitely looks like most of that detail is going to really come in with the other pieces. This is more the overall framework. Now, looking at the instructions real quick, it does show these 2 pieces coming together, forming around the kind of cockpit. Now, for some of these pieces, it definitely looks like it's going to be a lot easier to paint doing some of these pieces in what is the term I'm looking for? Basically, like before assembling, just because of the fact that with this cockpit, you'll be able to see into some of the angles, but it'll be very difficult to get to some of these as far as painting and still having it be at the same standard as what you can reach easy. Now, the cockpit itself, as well as these other pieces, definitely have a lot more detail on here. What's interesting, to me at least, is we have the back of the torso of one of the drivers or riders, and then the front of the torso is 2 separate pieces. So I'm kind of surprised that with as thick as the sprue is able to be, that wasn't printed as one solid piece like we typically get with most kits. And then we also have the actual displays and controls that they're going to be using, and there's a good amount of detail there. I really like when we get these screens, because then I've seen some people actually take the time to very carefully paint. I've seen some of these screens about this size where somebody actually painted the World 1-1 level of the original Mario Brothers game right there, and it come out amazing. So, you know, the fact that, you know, we have these screens to work with, and, you know, really just comes down to your skill and your imagination as far as what you want to put on there. And, you know, I love when somebody that's able to do that fine freehand painting like that goes in and does something like that, because, I mean, based on how small that screen is, if you're able to freehand a workable picture into it, I mean, that is some high skill right there that I have yet to match. Now we're on to our third sprue, which is the last of the add-ons, including the weapons themselves. And we definitely have a ton more detail here, especially when you flip it over. Like, you see like kind of hatches on there. So like if you have the hatch open, you can actually see a lot of detailing in there. And it looks like we actually have 3 different heads you can choose from for the driver, which means the other riders would have different heads as well, because it actually looks like there's more than one in here. Yeah, we get at least 2 riders and 3 different heads. So definitely can change it up so that way, you know, you can have a more unique one if you're fielding more than one of these. And you know, watching the Path to Glory series that they did for the League of Votann on Warhammer Plus, I mean, each of these units, especially the Land Fortress, are absolutely devastating. But a lot of great detail here. Really looking forward to building this as well. Go ahead and set these aside. All right, so next is the Brokhyr Thunderkyn. All right. So once again, our rule book, and it looks like there are 3 different weapon options that we see on the back that you can choose from. And then we do have a couple different paint options that we see, as well as it looks like 7 different head options to choose from. And we have the instruction booklet is 4 full pages. And there's our transfers. We have 3 bases for the 3 models. And so each of these sprues, let's take a look. All right, so this one is definitely not the same as the others, but looking these 2 side by side, they look almost identical, but there's still some variation. So not all 3 of these, so all 3 of these real sprues are for each model are going to be completely different here. So definitely is going to give you a bunch more unique units, especially if you're fielding multiples of these. A lot of great detail on the weapons, especially the armor itself as well, just because of all the things that you can actually add to it and further expand on the detail for the Thunderkyn. And I mean, these guys, I believe, from what I remember reading, I believe that they're meant to be more of the miners types, and that these are their heavy drilling weapons. And so having these in your army, I mean, these weapons are going to be devastating because they're made to go through material that normally couldn't be gone through by most conventional means. Next is the Cthonian Berserkers. Alright, there we go. So for 5 miniatures, there we go. Man, I am clumsy today. All right, there we go. So we have 5 miniatures. Additionally, we have, looks like 4 extra bases. So 1 big and then 3 of the smaller. And then our 5 basic that come in the box for your 5 models. Now, there are a couple different loadouts options that I see just on the back. We have more transfers. Our assembly guide. So we show 4 of the different units. It looks like 3 different weapon options. And then on the bigger base would be like a 2-man team that would work together. So you basically have, let's see, looks like 2 main kit styles. So we have this one that has the 4 main models and the 2-man team, as well as these 2 smaller sprues, or the same kind of thing but with hammers, where these ones kind of look like kind of a power glaives. And then let's see. Or it looks like, so you basically also can choose to do, you know, just 5 of the Thunder Hammer, or just the hammer models, whatever those weapons are called. So definitely a lot of different options in this kit. And as always, you know, more options means more opportunities for kit bashing. So we have basically a total of 3 small sprues, or 1 big and 1 small, however you want to look at it. And looking at it, you know, we have parts of multiple bodies on each sprue, you know, because we're going to get 5 total, well, really between 5 or 6 guys, depending on which direction you go with the models. Now, personally, I really like the look of the 2-man team, so I know I'm going to be going that route. And as far as the weapons aesthetics go, I really like the kind of power axe, you know, glaive looking weapons more than the others. So at the very least, I'm going to be doing 1 of those teams. And then if we get some other boxes of these, you know, then branch out and probably do some of the others, because I like to have kind of a bit of everything. And so, you know, doing that gives me that opportunity. Of course, there is always the magnet approach, where you paint all of them and have the options to just swap them out as needed. But that is going to be way too time consuming for me, because I'm pretty confident that I could probably do, you know, twice as many models in the time it would take to customize them to include magnets where I can swap out everything. So that sounds more like the way to go for me. Now, looking at these sprues, ton of detail on all the weapons, especially the bodies themselves as well, where most of the Votann, you know, their armor was less detailed itself. A lot of these guys don't have a lot of armor, and you know, they have pockets, they have pouches, they have belts, they have rivets, all kinds of things coming off of them. And so it makes for a much more, dynamic looking sprue for that character. So definitely some cool stuff there. Those are actually some of my favorite of the models that have been announced so far, just because of the kind of power glaive looking weapons. Now here's Brokhyr Iron-Master. Oops. Just dropped some of the bases. So we have 5 total miniatures in this kit, which is interesting because I have 5 bases right here and I dropped 2 others. So a 5 miniature kit with 7 bases. So that right there is pretty interesting. We have another transfer, and then we have our 2-page instructions. So taking a quick look. Let's take a look at the back. So it still shows on both of these, both the assembly instructions and the box, that there's only 5 total models. And so it's not like, some of the extra kind of like objective marker type ones that you get sometimes. So that tells me that most likely this kit was mispacked with some extra bases in it. So then we just have the one bigger sprue for the entire kit. And now with this, the Iron-Master, he's basically surrounded by, let's see if it says it on the box. No, it doesn't have what they're called. I believe they were called the Iron-Kin, for what I remember, more of the kind of AI robots. They're treated almost as well as the actual leagues themselves, are just as much a member of it. And so this guy, I'm assuming, is probably some sort of like artificer or something for them. I haven't had spent enough time with the codex for the league as much as I would like, but definitely a really cool model. I really like the detail on these. And especially the fact that we're getting able to see more of the mechanized kind of AI units that we don't really see much of so far. And I'm hoping that down the road we see more releases of those, because with the exception of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Necron, there's not really many AI type units. And with this far in the future, and with humanity's focus on AI type stuff, even though there's so many things speaking against it as far as like in the media and stories and things like that and warnings, I don't see that changing with humanity. And so I would expect that even though there's so many things speaking out against it, eventually there's going to be a lot more AI type stuff. And so I'm surprised we don't see much of that in 40K. Now, I've read so much 40K lore that I've forgotten a lot of it. Now, there may be something, like most of that could have been lost, during the Age of Darkness, that I'm forgetting about, or it could be that maybe the Emperor decreed, no AI, similar to how, like in the Dune books, it was decreed no AI because of what happened during the Butler and Jihad. So there might be something there along those lines that I've forgotten, which would explain it. But I remember when these were first announced, it seemed very taboo as far as the rest of the galaxy is concerned. But I definitely hope we see more of them. And I'm just looking at this sprue itself. I mean, these are going to be some great looking models, and definitely looking forward to building and painting them. And then next is the Einhyr Hearthguard. Now, what I thought was interesting about these guys is they look like they are, like, as far as their armor is concerned, they kind of look like they're ripping off the Space Marines to a degree. But really, the models themselves very much look like the Terran units in StarCraft. They're kind of Space Marine guys. And then once again, another transfer sheet. We have a bag of bases, which I see 5 bases here, which this is a 5 model kit, so that makes sense. Now, we do have 2 full sprues. Let's see. And so both sprues are unique. So it's not like a duplicate sprue set. Now with these guys, with their suits themselves, there's a ton of detail on these suits. Like you even have like a mechanized spine coming up the back, which is really cool looking. And that is a crap load of heads to choose from too. I mean, on this sprue we have 12 different heads to pick from for 5 different models. So that means that you could do multiple units of these and have none of them be the same. So I really like when they do stuff like that. Now these guys that have the extended kind of power blade coming out of them definitely look really cool. And their guns also have a ton of detail on them as well. And I'm curious, but because I do see some plasma guns on here, I'm curious about the success rate of their plasma guns versus the rest of the galaxies. And again, there's just so much detail on almost every single piece here. These guys are going to be a lot of fun to paint for sure. All right, now going into the last box before we actually look at the sprues closely. All right. So this is, of course, one model, and it is a large number of pages for the assembly. And I'm showing, let's see, the main gun, there's 3 different options. There's 3 different types of launchers. And then there's a forward mounting gun that has 2 different versions you can pick from. So a lot of different armament options. So again, if you field multiple of these, they won't be exactly the same, unless of course you're running them to be exactly the same. So I really like that aspect. And then once again, we do have the clear plastic sprues for the cockpits. So we have our first sprue, which looks to be a lot of the framework, as well as one of the top pieces where we have one of the cockpits. We have some piping for, I'm guessing, exhaust of some sort. Probably exhaust for the heavy cannon that's on top. But even though there's a lot of detail as far as the size go, there's not a lot of fine detail on these, at least on that sprue. And now we get to this sprue, which has parts of the different drivers, parts of some of the weapons, And so this is where we're getting into that detail here. But other than the units themselves, not a lot of detail of the super fine variety. Then we have our last sprue, which has the last of the body pieces, as well as the other cockpit, the tires and things like that. And probably more detail in this sprue than the first one. Actually, yeah, a lot more detail on this one than the first one. But again, other than the pieces that have the actual bodies themselves, they're not the fine detail, which is not surprising just because of how large the vehicle is. And there's a lot of other details that are added on top of it to bring more character to it, so it's not just kind of just like sheer sides that you're painting. And then we even have details on the inside of the hatches, which most of those hatches are likely going to be closed in most people's building. And then here's that sprue with the clear pieces. And again, like I was saying, to prime these, you would use a varnish on them first. And then last but not least, one last transfer sheet. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at those models. All right, so we're starting with the land fortress itself. So this is the close-up of the clear sprue. This is that final body sprue. And so here's the detail of the hatches like we were talking about. The sprue that has pretty much the bulk of the bodies themselves and the weaponry. And then the last body sprue with the launchers themselves. And the other side, not a lot of detail there, which pretty much none of this is going to see the light of day once the model's built. Now for the Hearthguard. I mean, look at that detail just in there. So much detail there, and I love that we got the horse head and the ram head on there. A lot of detail there, and then here's the kind of reinforced spinal columns that I was talking about. All right, this is the other vehicle. So there's the clear sprue for that. So that's the kind of mechanized pieces and the weapons. The cockpit and the body itself. And then not a lot of under detail. And then the actual body of the vehicle itself. And again, underside, not a lot of detail. So this one is the Iron-Master. The Berserkers. So here's that first sprue. This is the Thunderkyn. Like like I was saying, a ton of detail on these guys. And then lastly, we have Grimnyr. I mean, look at that detail work on his cloak and his drones themselves, in so much detail. Or those kits, rather. All right, now that we're done with that, that is everything for these for the unboxing video for tonight. Now, once again, these were provided to us by Games Workshop for this video, and as I was saying before, these are available for pre-order as of the date that this video is released. So definitely keep an eye out for them there. Hit up the Games Workshop site and expand your Votann army, because there is a lot of really cool stuff here. I know some of my friends have actually used proxies for some of these units already to try them out, and I'm hearing a lot of really great things about them, and especially the Land Fortress. Now with the Land Fortress, that one I actually was able to see in action in that Path to Glory series, and it was absolutely devastating. Now with the recent changes that were done in the points updates, I don't believe the effectiveness of this vehicle was changed, just maybe the pricing, or the points values rather, as for the cost. But definitely worth running one of these if you can, because I mean, it is amazing how deadly this thing can be. And I mean, just watching it take out those enemy forces as effectively as it did, it completely blew me away, because I was expecting something on par with the other units, and to see it just obliterate pretty much everything that it hit was awesome, and a lot of fun to watch cinematically. But that's it for tonight. Thank you guys all for watching, and as always, you have a great weekend.